The Prescott estate stood on the edge of Willow Creek, a quiet town that never slept peacefully. It was a house built with old money and silent grief, tall iron gates, marble floors that echoed with loneliness, and chandeliers that glowed for no one in particular. Inside that mansion worked Emma Alvarez, a 30-year-old maid from San Antonio, a woman with hands roughened by years of labor, but a heart still soft enough to notice small details others overlooked. She had been at the mansion for almost a year, tending to rooms that no one visited, polishing silver that no one used, and dusting portraits of people whose smiles were painted decades ago. Every morning, she entered the nursery, a pale blue room with toys arranged neatly on the shelves, a rocking chair by the window, and a cradle that had never held a baby. Nathan Prescott, the master of the house, had ordered the nursery to be kept spotless, though no child had ever lived there. Emma never asked why. Servants in houses like these learned early. Silence was safer than curiosity. That day, however, silence broke on its own. As she folded a small cotton blanket, embroidered with the letter C, her hand brushed against something cold in the back of the drawer. At first, she thought it was a coin, but when her fingers closed around it, she realized it was heavier, shaped, deliberate. She pulled it out and the sunlight caught the glint of gold. A ring. It was simple yet elegant, a man's wedding band, faded by time but undeniably expensive. And inside the ring, barely visible, were words engraved in delicate script. To Clara, forever yours. Nathan. Emma's breath hitched. Nathan Prescott. The billionaire. The man who barely spoke 10 words to his staff. The man who kept his emotions sealed behind expensive suits and boardroom glass. She'd seen him walk the marble hallways, tall, handsome, and endlessly distant, like a man carrying a ghost in his chest. But who was Clara? Emma had heard whispers among the kitchen maids. Some said Mr. Prescott once had a wife who died in childbirth. Others claimed he had never been married at all, that he lived for business alone. Still others said there was once a tragedy, something the newspapers buried, something involving a fire. But no one had ever mentioned a name. Now, holding that ring, the truth felt close enough to touch and dangerous enough to burn. The room suddenly felt smaller. The nursery mobile above the crib spun slowly, the glass stars catching the light like little eyes watching her. She turned the ring over again and again, tracing the engraving, feeling the weight of secrets that didn't belong to her. She thought of putting it back, pretending she had never seen it. That would be the right thing to do, wouldn't it? But curiosity, that quiet, forbidden thing, had already taken root. What if Clara wasn't dead? What if Mr. Prescott had hidden her away, or worse, lost her to something unspeakable? Why keep her ring here, in a room meant for a child that never came? Downstairs, the sound of heavy footsteps echoed, slow, deliberate, and too familiar. Nathan was home early. Emma's pulse quickened. She looked at the clock, 3:15 p.m. He usually returned closer to 5. She quickly slipped the ring into her apron pocket and shut the drawer. But as she turned to leave, the nursery door creaked open. Nathan Prescott stood there, framed by the golden light from the hallway. His grey eyes, cold and unreadable, landed directly on the open drawer, then on Emma. For a moment, the silence between them felt alive. "Miss Alvarez," he said quietly, his voice smooth, but laced with something she couldn't name. "I didn't expect anyone to be in here today." Emma's fingers trembled around the ring inside her pocket. I was just dusting, sir." He stepped inside, his shoes clicking softly on the wooden floor. His gaze drifted over the cradle, the toys, the untouched room, and for the first time Emma saw something behind his expression. Not anger, not suspicion, but grief, deep, old and sharp. He stopped near the window, looking out into the grey afternoon. "This room," he murmured, "wasn't meant to be empty." The words hung in the air like fog. Emma's throat tightened. She wanted to ask, who was Clara? Whose child was this room for? But the questions stayed trapped in her chest. Nathan turned toward her again, his voice now colder. "Some things in this house are best left untouched," and with that, He walked out, leaving her standing alone, her hand still closed around the ring, her heart pounding against the silence he left behind. Outside, thunder rolled somewhere in the distance. It was going to rain, and Emma knew, somehow, that the storm had only just begun. That night, the storm arrived in full force. Rain lashed against the mansion's tall windows, drumming endlessly over the glass like restless fingers. Thunder cracked across the hills of Willow Creek, illuminating the marble corridors in sharp flashes of blue-white light. The entire Prescott estate seemed to tremble. The old chandeliers swayed, the portraits quivered on their hooks, and the echo of each rumble felt like a heartbeat trapped inside the walls. Emma Alvarez couldn't sleep. She lay awake in her small attic room above the servants' quarters, her blanket pulled to her chin, eyes wide open. The ring was still in her apron pocket, now resting on the small table beside her lamp. Every time lightning flared through the window, the gold caught the light and glimmered faintly. As if it was alive, she told herself she would return it in the morning. Quietly, discreetly, before Mr. Prescott noticed it was gone. But something in her heart told her that he already knew, and for some reason he wanted her to keep it. Why else would he say, "Some things are best left untouched"? It didn't sound like a warning. It sounded like guilt. At around midnight, the power went out. The mansion fell into darkness. Only the soft sound of the rain and the occasional groan of the old wooden beams broke the silence. Emma lit a candle and sat up, her reflection flickering in the small mirror by her bed. Her mind wandered back to the nursery. The folded blankets, the embroidered letter C, the untouched cradle. She remembered the way Nathan Prescott's eyes had looked, not cold anymore, but broken, like a man haunted by something he couldn't forgive himself for. Finally, she took the ring in her hand. It was cool against her skin, smooth except for the engraving inside. She traced the letters slowly, to Clara, forever yours, Nathan, Clara. Who was she? His wife, his lover, his ghost? Emma whispered the name aloud. The sound felt heavy in the quiet room, almost forbidden. Then something strange happened. A gust of wind blew against the window, hard enough to make it rattle. The candle flickered wildly, nearly going out. And in that trembling light, for a split second, Emma thought she saw movement in the mirror, a shape behind her shoulder, faint, like a woman in white standing near the door. She turned quickly. Nothing, only darkness. Her heart thudded painfully in her chest. "It's just the storm," she muttered, forcing a weak laugh. But when she turned back to the mirror, she noticed something on the glass, faint, fogged, as if someone had exhaled against it, a single word written in the condensation, "Don't." She gasped and stumbled backward, the candle nearly dropping from her hand. But within seconds, the word faded, as if it had never been there. Downstairs, a door slammed. Emma froze, listening. The sound came again, slow footsteps across the main hall floor, echoing through the mansion like someone dragging their feet. No one else should have been awake. The other maids slept in the west wing, and the butler, Mr. Green, always locked the main hall before midnight. She snatched her robe and hurried to the landing, peering down the staircase. The hall was dark, except for the lightning flashing through the windows. For a heartbeat, she thought she saw a silhouette, tall, unmistakably male, standing near the portrait gallery. "Nathan?" she whispered. No answer. Then the sound of the nursery door creaking open. Emma's pulse quickened. She descended the stairs slowly, the candle flame shivering in her trembling hand. When she reached the hall, the air felt colder, heavy with that stillness that only exists in houses filled with memories. The nursery door stood ajar. Light flickering from within, she pushed it open carefully. Inside, the mobile above the crib was turning, gently, steadily, though no wind stirred the air. The toys on the shelves rattled slightly, and the embroidered blanket with the letter C had fallen onto the floor. And then she saw him. Nathan Prescott stood by the window, dressed in his black housecoat, his back to her. Lightning flashed, revealing his reflection in the glass. his face pale, drawn, and wet with tears. "Mr. Prescott." Emma's voice trembled. "Sir, are you all right?" He didn't turn around. "She used to love the rain," he said softly, almost to himself. "She said it reminded her that heaven still cried for us." Emma didn't know what to say. Her throat felt dry, her fingers numb. She finally asked, her voice fragile. Nathan turned slowly. His eyes looked empty, hollowed by time. "Clara," he said. "My wife." The name lingered between them, echoing like the ring of a bell long after it's been struck. "She died 6 years ago," he continued, his tone flat, almost mechanical. "Car accident. They said it was instant, but I still hear her scream sometimes. It never really goes away." Emma stepped closer, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm so sorry, sir." He looked down at her, then at her trembling hands, and his gaze fell to the gold ring she was clutching. "You found it," he said quietly. "In the nursery." Emma swallowed hard. "I didn't mean to. I was cleaning." He raised a hand, stopping her. "It's all right. Maybe it's better that you did." He took the ring from her palm, turning it slowly in his fingers. "Clara wanted this room ready," he said, his voice breaking for the first time. "She was 7 months pregnant. We painted the walls together, picked the toys, folded the clothes. She said the baby's name would start with C, whether it was a boy or a girl." Emma's eyes filled with tears. The nursery suddenly felt suffocating, filled with too much love, too much loss. "When she died," Nathan whispered, "I couldn't come in here again. But I couldn't close the door either. It's like she's still waiting." A tear slid down his cheek. For a long time, neither of them spoke. The rain kept falling outside, the thunder rolling farther away now. Then, without warning, a soft sound came from the cradle, a slow, rhythmic creak, as if it was rocking on its own. Nathan's head snapped toward it. Emma's candle flickered. They both froze. There was no wind, no movement, yet the cradle continued to rock gently back and forth. Nathan's lips trembled. He whispered, "Clara!" And in that moment, Emma swore she heard it too. A faint lullaby sung by a woman's voice, soft as the rain, coming from nowhere and everywhere at once. Nathan dropped the ring. It rolled across the floor, spinning until it came to rest beneath the cradle. The lullaby stopped. Only the thunder answered. Emma's candle went out, and the nursery was dark again. The morning came slow, grey, and heavy with mist. The storm had passed, but the air inside Prescott Manor felt unchanged, thick, tense, and alive with something unseen. The silence was unnatural, like the house itself was holding its breath. Emma didn't go to the nursery that morning. She couldn't. The images of last night haunted her, the ring rolling under the cradle rocking by itself, that soft lullaby that sounded like a whisper from another world. She sat in the servants' kitchen, her hands wrapped around a cup of coffee gone cold. The butler, Mr. Green, was reading the newspaper in his usual corner, his silver hair shining under the weak morning light. He was an old man who'd worked for Nathan's family for over 30 years, seen every triumph, every tragedy. "Are you feeling unwell, Miss Alvarez?" he asked without looking up. Emma hesitated. "Just tired, sir." He folded the paper and studied her face. "Storms tend to stir more than the weather in this house," he said quietly. "You might want to stay away from the nursery for a while." Emma's eyes snapped up. "Why would you say that?" he sighed. "Because you're not the first one who's heard things in there." Her breath caught. Mr. Green leaned closer, lowering his voice. "Years ago, after Mrs. Clara's accident, Mr. Prescott fired every servant who entered that room. Said they were lying. Said grief makes people see things. But they weren't lying, Miss Alvarez. They all saw her." Emma felt her skin crawl. "Saw? Who?" "The mistress," he whispered. "Mrs. Clara, or what's left of her." A chill spread through Emma's chest. She didn't want to believe him, but every word felt like confirmation of what she already knew in her heart. "Why didn't you ever tell him?" she asked. "I did," Mr. Green said. "Once. He looked me in the eye and said, 'If she's still here, then let her be. She's the only thing I have left.'" He rose from his chair and left her alone, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Emma stared at the window. watching raindrops slide down the glass, even though the rain had stopped. She couldn't shake the sound of that lullaby. It hadn't been a trick of her mind. She had heard it clearly, soft and mournful, a mother's voice in the dark. By noon, she could no longer resist. The house was quiet. Nathan had gone into town for business. The other staff were cleaning the east wing. Emma walked up the grand staircase, each step creaking beneath her feet, her heart pounding faster with every turn. When she reached the nursery door, it stood slightly open, just like before. A faint smell of roses drifted from inside, fresh, almost as if someone had placed flowers there recently. She pushed the door open and stepped in. The room looked the same. Sunlight through the lace curtains. Toys neatly lined up, the rocking cradle still. But something had changed. There was a new photograph on the dresser, one she had never seen before. It showed a young woman in a white dress, smiling gently, her arms wrapped around Nathan Prescott. Her eyes sparkled with the same softness that his now seemed to have lost forever. On the back of the photo, written in delicate handwriting, were the words, "For our little one, love." Clara. Emma's throat tightened. She sat on the edge of the chair, staring at the picture, when suddenly a soft sound came from behind her. Tap, 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 it was coming from the window. Emma turned slowly. There was no one outside, only fog and the faint outline of the trees. Yet the sound continued, 3 slow taps, as if fingers were brushing against the glass. She walked toward it, heart hammering. "Is someone there?" she whispered. No reply. Then, from the reflection on the window, she saw movement behind her. The cradle was rocking again. She spun around. It moved rhythmically, back and forth, back and forth. The air felt colder now, sharp enough to sting her skin. Her breath came out in visible puffs. "Clara?" she whispered before she could stop herself. The mobile above the cradle began to spin, faster this time, the little glass stars clinking together softly. And then she heard it, the lullaby again, distant, fading in and out like an echo from another time. "Hush, my darling, don't you cry. The angels sing, the rain will dry." Her eyes filled with tears. It was beautiful, heartbreaking, and terrifying all at once. "Who are you?" Emma cried. "What do you want?" The cradle stopped. The music ceased. Silence. She backed away, trembling. Then she saw it, a glint under the cradle. The ring. It had rolled there last night and somehow, impossibly, was now standing upright on its edge, as if balanced by invisible hands. Emma crouched down, reaching for it. But just as her fingers brushed the metal, a whisper filled her ear, soft, close, and unmistakably a woman's voice. "Find the letter." She screamed and stumbled backward, clutching her chest. The door behind her slammed shut. "Who are you?" she cried again. No answer. Only the faint sound of sobbing, like a woman weeping quietly, muffled by walls. Emma pushed the door open and ran out of the room. Her pulse racing so hard, she thought she might faint. She didn't stop until she reached the library. It was dark and heavy, with the scent of leather and dust. She leaned against the shelves, gasping for breath. "Find the letter." The words echoed again in her mind, clearer now. Clara wanted her to find something. But where? Emma turned toward the rows of old books, her eyes scanning the shelves. Many of them were untouched. First editions, family journals, ledgers. Then one caught her attention. A large leather-bound photo album with a small ribbon tied around it. Her hands shook as she pulled it out and untied the ribbon. The pages were filled with photographs. Nathan and Clara on their wedding day, Clara painting in the garden, the two of them decorating the nursery. The joy in those pictures was so vivid it felt alive. But near the end of the album, there was an envelope tucked between the last 2 pages. On it, in faint handwriting, were the words, "To be opened only if I never return." Emma's breath trembled. Her fingers hesitated on the seal. Was this the letter Clara wanted her to find? She looked toward the window. Outside, the sky had turned grey again. A cold gust swept through the room, flipping one of the album's pages on its own. Emma broke the seal. Inside was a single sheet of paper. Written in Clara's elegant hand, "Nathan, my love, if you're reading this, it means I didn't make it home. Please don't let them lie to you. The brakes didn't fail. The accident wasn't an accident. You must protect the baby. They'll come for what's ours. Don't trust anyone at the company, not even your brother. Love, Clara. Emma's eyes widened. Her hands went numb. Clara's death wasn't an accident. She read the last line again and again, her heart pounding harder each time. Don't trust your brother. Mr. Prescott had a brother. Emma had never seen him, but the papers had once mentioned his name. Lucas Prescott, co-founder of the Prescott Foundation, the man who vanished after Clara's death. Emma suddenly understood why Nathan kept the nursery locked between grief and obsession. He wasn't just mourning. He was hiding something or someone. The sound of the front door opening downstairs snapped her out of her trance. Nathan was back. She quickly folded the letter and tucked it into her pocket. Her mind was racing, her body trembling. She had stumbled into something that wasn't just a ghost story. It was a secret worth killing for. Nathan's voice echoed faintly from the hall. "Miss Alvarez? Are you here?" Emma froze. He was calling for her, calm, polite, but with a tone that sent a shiver down her spine. And in that moment, one thought burned clear in her mind. He couldn't know she had read that letter. Not yet, because now she wasn't just the maid who found his ring. She was the woman holding his dead wife's final truth. The clock in the hallway struck 4 when Nathan's voice echoed through the mansion again. "Miss Alvarez, are you upstairs?" Emma froze by the library shelves, the folded letter still hidden in her apron pocket. She could hear his footsteps approaching. Slow, unhurried, yet impossibly heavy, like each step carried years of sorrow. Her mind raced. What would she say if he asked what she was doing there? Should she admit she'd found the letter, or lie, pretend she was just cleaning again? She slipped the letter deeper into her pocket, smoothed her apron, and turned toward the doorway just as Nathan appeared. He looked different from the night before. The storm had stripped him of that distant, composed elegance he wore like armor. His eyes were rimmed red from lack of sleep, and his tie hung loose, as if he hadn't even noticed. "Ah," he said, his voice low, almost weary. "You're here." Emma tried to smile. "I was just dusting the shelves, sir. I didn't realize you'd be back so soon." Nathan nodded slowly, glancing around the room. "I didn't plan to. But I find it difficult to stay away from this house for long. It's like the walls keep whispering my name." His words made her uneasy. "Did you sleep at all?" she asked carefully. He gave a faint, humorless laugh. "Sleep? No, I don't dream anymore, Miss Alvarez. I only remember." He walked toward the window, staring out over the estate grounds, the fog rolling gently across the gardens. Then, almost absently, he said, "You went back to the nursery this morning." Her heart stopped. "Sir?" He turned his head slightly. "I can tell. You moved the curtains." "Clara used to do that." Emma swallowed. I'm sorry, sir. I didn't mean—" He raised a hand. "It's all right. I know you're curious. Everyone who works here becomes curious eventually. The house feeds on it." He faced her fully then, eyes searching her face. "Tell me, Miss Alvarez, do you believe the dead can speak?" The question caught her off guard. I don't know," she stammered. "Maybe in dreams. Or memories." Nathan nodded as though her answer mattered deeply. "Memories," he repeated. "Yes, memories are ghosts that never leave." He walked past her, his cologne faint, his presence chilling. "I'll be in my study," he said quietly. "If you hear the music again, don't be afraid. Sometimes grief finds its own voice." And then he was gone. Emma stood alone, her pulse hammering. He knew about the music, about the lullaby, about everything. But what if he also knew about the letter? That evening she stayed in her quarters, the letter spread across her small wooden desk, the candlelight trembling as if nervous. She read it again, slowly this time, tracing Clara's looping handwriting with her finger. The brakes didn't fail. "The accident wasn't an accident," she whispered the words under her breath. Every time she said them, they seemed to grow heavier, darker, more dangerous. Lucas Prescott, the brother. The name lingered in her mind, like a shadow that refused to disappear. She'd heard of him, of course. Everyone in the city had. Lucas had co-founded Prescott Industries with Nathan, then vanished after Clara's death, leaving behind rumors of betrayal, stolen money, and scandal. But Nathan never spoke of him, and the press had long stopped asking. Emma glanced at the door. The house was quiet. Somewhere in the east wing, the grandfather clock chimed 6 times. The sound echoed through the walls like a countdown. She decided she couldn't stay silent anymore. If Clara's death had been murder, then Nathan deserved to know the truth, or maybe he already did and had chosen to bury it. Either way, Emma needed answers. She tucked the letter into a small leather pouch and left her room. The hallway outside was dimly lit by sconces, their flames flickering as if aware of her secret. The carpet muffled her footsteps as she made her way toward Nathan's study, but halfway down the corridor she heard something. Faint, distant, but distinct. A voice. It was humming the lullaby. Her blood turned to ice. The sound wasn't coming from the nursery this time. It was coming from the direction of the cellar. For a moment she hesitated. The rational part of her screamed to ignore it. Go to Nathan, hand him the letter, forget everything. But curiosity, that quiet pull of fate, dragged her feet toward the sound. The cellar door was old and heavy, tucked behind the servants' staircase. When she opened it, a cold rush of air swept past her face, carrying the smell of earth and something faintly metallic, like rust or blood. She descended slowly, one hand gripping the railing, the candle flame shaking. The deeper she went, the colder it became. The humming grew clearer, now unmistakably a woman's voice. Hush, my darling, don't you cry. Her heart pounded. She reached the bottom step and lifted the candle high. Rows of old wine racks stretched into the shadows, their bottles long covered in dust. In the far corner she saw something new, a wooden chest, old but recently moved. The ground around it was disturbed, as if someone had been there not long ago. She stepped closer. Hello? She whispered. The humming stopped. Silence. Then from behind her the door creaked shut. Emma whirled around. The cellar was now sealed in darkness, except for her small, flickering candle. Panic rose in her throat. She turned back to the chest. It was locked, but a faded tag still clung to the latch. On it was written a single word, Clara. Her fingers shook. She knelt and touched the lock. It was old, rusted, but she could feel warmth beneath the metal, as if someone had touched it recently. Clara, she whispered again. Suddenly, a burst of cold air blew through the cellar. Extinguishing her candle, she gasped, plunging into darkness, and then she heard it. A whisper right next to her ear, so close it made her freeze in terror. Don't trust him. Emma stumbled backward, her heart hammering. Who are you? What do you want? No answer. Only soft weeping, echoing from somewhere deep within the cellar. She ran up the stairs, tripping, her hands scraping the wood. She burst through the door into the hallway, gasping for breath, her body trembling. At the top of the stairs, Nathan Prescott was standing. Miss Alvarez, he said calmly. What were you doing down there? His tone was even, but his eyes, those grey, unreadable eyes, glinted with something darker than curiosity. I heard something, she stammered. A sound from the cellar. He stepped closer, his expression unreadable. The cellar has been locked for years. You must have imagined it. But, sir, the door— Enough, he said sharply, his voice cutting through the air like a blade. Then softer, you shouldn't wander at night. The house. It plays tricks. He turned and began walking away, his footsteps echoing down the hall. Then he paused and looked over his shoulder. And Miss Alvarez, if you value your peace of mind, stay out of the cellar. He disappeared into the shadows. Emma stood frozen, her breath unsteady. The letter in her pocket felt heavier now, as if it carried the weight of 1,000 secrets. She returned to her room and bolted the door behind her. Her reflection in the small mirror looked pale, frightened, but determined. She pulled out the letter again and read Clara's words for the 10th time. The part about the accident, the part about the company, the part about the brother. But now, one sentence haunted her more than the rest. You must protect the baby. What baby? The nursery. The cradle. The blanket with the letter C. Emma's eyes widened as a new thought struck her. What if the child had survived? What if Nathan had hidden it or lost it, or worse? Outside, thunder rumbled again in the distance. Though the sky was clear, Emma knew she couldn't leave. Not yet. The truth was buried somewhere within that house, maybe behind the locked cellar, maybe within Nathan's grief, maybe in the memory of a woman who refused to rest. She blew out her candle and lay awake the entire night, listening to the faint creak of the cradle upstairs, and as she drifted between fear and exhaustion, she heard the lullaby again, this time right outside her door, slow, tender and chillingly real. Hush, my darling, don't you cry. Mama's here, she never died. Dawn broke over Willow Creek, soft and silver, but it brought no comfort to Emma Alvarez. Her eyes burned from sleeplessness. Her pulse throbbed in her ears as she sat by the window, watching fog roll like slow-moving ghosts across the garden. Somewhere down below, Nathan Prescott's car engine hummed to life, and moments later, the sound faded toward town. For the first time in days, she was alone in the mansion. Entirely alone. The others, Mr. Green, the cook, the gardener, had gone to the market early that morning, leaving the house in her charge. She had begged for that duty, pretending calm. But in truth, her heart had settled on one purpose, to find out what Nathan Prescott was hiding. The letter burned in her pocket like fire. You must protect the baby. Clara's final words looped endlessly in her mind. Protect the baby. The nursery, the cradle, the embroidered letter C. Was there really a child? Had Clara been pregnant when she died, or had the baby survived somehow? Emma's instincts screamed that the answer lay somewhere Nathan never wanted anyone to look. The cellar. She waited until she was certain the car had vanished down the long drive. Then, heart-hammering, she slipped on her shoes, grabbed a lantern from the hall, and made her way toward the forbidden door. The house was too quiet. Every sound, the tick of the grandfather clock, the groan of the stairs, seemed unnaturally loud, as if the walls themselves were warning her to stop. But she didn't. The cellar door yielded to her touch. It wasn't even locked this time. That somehow terrified her more. The air that rose up was colder than before, damp and heavy. She lit her lantern and began her descent. Each step creaked beneath her, and as the light fell across the stone walls, she saw old stains, water maybe, or something darker. When she reached the bottom, the humming started again, soft, melancholy, familiar. Hush, my darling, don't you cry. Emma froze. The voice seemed to come from all directions at once, gentle, mournful, heartbreakingly human. She raised the lantern and moved forward. The old chest with Clara written on its tag still sat in the corner. But now the ground around it looked freshly disturbed, as if someone had been digging. Her hands trembled as she knelt beside it. The lock had been broken. She took a deep breath and lifted the lid. Inside lay a collection of items, carefully preserved under a sheet of linen, a faded baby blanket with the letter C embroidered in blue thread, a pair of tiny socks, and a framed ultrasound photo. Beneath those, wrapped in an old silk shawl, was another envelope. Her breath caught. It was sealed with the same wax crest that marked Clara's first letter. On the front was written in trembling handwriting, "For whoever finds this, tell my child the truth." Emma's fingers shook as she broke the seal. If you are reading this, then I am gone. They wanted to take the baby from me, to control Nathan, to control the company. Lucas said he'd fix everything, but I knew what that meant. He wanted the Prescott fortune for himself. I planned to run. Nathan didn't know. I couldn't tell him. He would have tried to stop me, or worse, trusted Lucas again. If they say it was an accident, don't believe them. Lucas tampered with the car, I felt it. The brakes slipped days before, and he insisted on getting it checked. He said it was nothing, that I was tired. But I wasn't. I knew he meant to end this before the baby was born. Nathan will suffer, and they'll tell him I was careless. Don't let him believe it. Tell my child that I love them. Tell Nathan that I forgive him, and if my spirit lingers, it's only to make sure truth finds the light. Emma's tears blurred the ink. She pressed a hand over her mouth to keep from sobbing aloud. Suddenly, a soft thud echoed behind her. She spun around. Raising the lantern, nothing, only shadows. Then another sound, the faint squeak of the cellar steps. Someone was coming down. Her pulse skyrocketed. She shoved the letter and the items back into the chest, slammed the lid, and turned off the lantern, plunging herself into darkness. She crouched low behind a barrel, barely breathing. Footsteps descended, slow and deliberate. Then came the light. Nathan Prescott's flashlight, cutting through the blackness. "Emma," he called softly. His voice was calm, too calm. "Are you down here again?" Her throat clenched. She didn't move. He took another step. "You shouldn't have come back. I told you to stay away." She could see his outline now, tall, controlled. The beam of light swept past her hiding spot, lingering on the chest. He sighed. "You found it, didn't you?" Emma's body stiffened. Nathan knelt beside the chest, running his hand along the lid as though it was something sacred. "Clara's things," he murmured. "She hid so much from me. And you think you've discovered something I don't know." He looked toward the shadows, directly toward where Emma crouched. "Come out, Miss Alvarez," he said quietly. "There's no need to hide." Her heart pounded so loudly she was sure he could hear it. Slowly she rose, the darkness swallowing her every movement. "Mr. Prescott," she whispered, "I didn't mean to—" "To what?" He interrupted gently. "To pry, to dig where you shouldn't. I found another letter," she said, her voice shaking. "Clara, she said the accident wasn't an accident. That your brother, Lucas," his voice turned sharp. "Always Lucas, that's what everyone wants to believe." He stood up, stepping closer, the flashlight beam catching the anguish in his face. "Do you know what it's like to lose everything in one night? Your wife, your child, your brother's loyalty, to wake up every morning to silence?" He paused, his breathing uneven. "Clara trusted Lucas more than she ever trusted me. She told him everything. And yes, maybe he betrayed her. But she betrayed me first." Emma's stomach twisted. "What do you mean?" Nathan's voice dropped to a whisper. "The baby wasn't mine." The words slammed into her like thunder. "What?" She gasped. He stared at her, eyes dark and hollow. "She told me weeks before she died. Said she couldn't live a lie anymore. Said the child belonged to my brother." Emma stumbled backward, shaking her head. "No, that can't be true. Her letters, she loved you." Nathan laughed bitterly. "Love. Love doesn't bury a man alive in guilt for 6 years. Love doesn't haunt every room in his house." He turned toward the chest again, his shoulders trembling. "You think that lullaby you keep hearing is Clara? Maybe it's not her voice at all, Miss Alvarez. Maybe it's just what's left of mine." For a long moment the two stood in silence, him in the half-light, her frozen between fear and pity. Then Nathan's tone softened, almost kind. "You should go. This house has taken enough from both of us." Emma hesitated. "What about Lucas?" "If what you say is true," he cut her off with a glance. "Lucas is dead." The words landed like a cold blade. "Dead?" Nathan nodded slowly. "He disappeared after the funeral. Everyone assumed he ran, but I know the truth. His body's been here all along." Emma's breath hitched. "What are you saying?" Nathan pointed to the floor, just beyond the chest. The earth there was darker, looser. "You wanted the truth, Miss Alvarez," he said quietly. "You're standing on it." She stumbled backward, the lantern trembling in her grip. You killed him." Nathan's face didn't change. "He tried to take everything from me. Clara, the company, the child. I couldn't let him have any of it." He stepped closer, his voice low, broken. "I buried him down here myself, but that doesn't mean I'm free. Every night I hear Clara's song. Every night I see her by the cradle. Do you think a man like me ever sleeps again?" Emma's legs felt weak. The cellar seemed to close in around her. "Nathan," she whispered, "you need to tell the truth." "The police?" He smiled faintly, almost sadly. The truth would destroy what's left of her memory. It would turn her into a headline, and me into a monster. Let the ghosts stay where they belong." He turned away, heading toward the stairs. "Go back upstairs, Miss Alvarez. Forget what you saw." But Emma didn't move. Her eyes had fallen on something half-buried near the chest. A small, rusted rattle, its silver handle engraved with the same delicate C. The baby. There had been a baby. Nathan, she whispered hoarsely. "What happened to the child?" He stopped halfway up the stairs. The pause stretched long enough to make the air itself hold still. Finally, without turning around, he said, "Some ghosts are better left unfound." Then he climbed the rest of the way and shut the door, leaving Emma in the dark with her trembling lantern, the letters, and the silent earth that hid more than one grave. That night, when she tried to sleep, the lullaby returned again, softer than ever, coming not from the nursery, not from the hallway, but from directly beneath her floorboards. And this time, there was another sound too, the faint crying of a child, small and distant, echoing from somewhere deep below the ground. The following morning dawned with the quiet cruelty of false peace. The sun broke through the mist over Willow Creek, scattering golden light across the lawn of the Prescott estate. Birds sang again in the gardens, the same gardens that had watched blood soak into their soil years ago. Emma Alvarez awoke to that deceptive calm, and to the haunting echo of a baby's cry that still lingered in her ears. She wasn't sure anymore what was real and what was memory. The night before had felt like a fevered dream. The confession, the grave beneath the cellar, the lullaby drifting through the floorboards. Yet the fear that gripped her chest was very real. She sat up slowly. The morning light fell on her hands, still trembling. Beneath her pillow, hidden for safety, was Clara Prescott's second letter, the one addressed, "For whoever finds this, tell my child the truth." She took it out, reread the words and whispered, "I can't stay here anymore." But even as she said it, she knew it wasn't that simple. The dead didn't release their grip so easily, not in this house. And Nathan Prescott wasn't a man who would let secrets slip through his walls. A knock came at her door. Emma jolted upright, her heart leaping. "Miss Alvarez." Mr. Green's soft, weary voice floated through. "Mr. Prescott requests you in the parlor. He says it's urgent." Her pulse raced. "I'll be down in a minute," she called, forcing steadiness into her voice. She dressed quickly, slipped the letter into her apron, and made her way down the grand staircase. The air in the mansion felt heavier than usual, thick with something unspoken. She passed the nursery on her way. The door stood slightly ajar again. For a moment she paused. A faint breeze stirred the curtains, and in the stillness, she thought she heard the soft clink of the mobile's glass stars. "Miss Alvarez," Nathan's voice called sharply from below. She tore her gaze away and continued down. Nathan Prescott sat in the parlor, dressed impeccably as always, though there was a hollowness to his posture, a fatigue that came not from sleeplessness, but from years of carrying a burden that had no name. On the coffee table before him lay two objects, a sealed envelope and a silver rattle. The same rattle Emma had seen half buried in the cellar. Her breath caught. He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sit." She obeyed, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Nathan studied her in silence for a long time, his grey eyes sharp, yet strangely calm. "I know you've been to the cellar again," he said finally. Emma's throat tightened. "Sir," he raised a hand. "Don't bother denying it. I saw the footprints, and I knew it was only a matter of time." He picked up the rattle, turned it in his hand, the faint chime of the bell inside ringing like distant rain. "You've read Clara's letters, haven't you?" There was no point lying now. "Yes," she whispered. Nathan leaned back. "Then you know what she believed. That Lucas wanted her gone. That I buried my brother to hide what really happened." Emma nodded cautiously. He smiled faintly, though it didn't reach his eyes. "Everyone thinks I'm the villain in this story, Miss Alvarez. Maybe they're right, but the truth is far more complicated than any letter can tell." He stood and walked toward the window, his back to her, the light cutting his silhouette in gold and shadow. "Clara loved me once, and I loved her more than I ever thought I could love another soul. But after the company grew, everything changed. My brother became greedy. Clara became afraid. She thought Lucas could protect her. From me," he turned then, his voice sharp. "But I never meant to hurt her, never." Emma's chest tightened with pity and dread. "Then why hide it all?" "Because love," he said bitterly, "is easier to mourn than guilt." He set the rattle back down and gestured toward the envelope on the table. "I found this in Clara's desk 2 years ago, long after she died. I've never shown it to anyone. Read it, Emma hesitated, then picked it up. The handwriting was Clara's, but the ink was smudged, the paper worn by time and tears. Nathan, if you ever read this, know that I tried to tell you the truth, but couldn't find the courage. I wasn't going to run away from you. I was running from Lucas. He said you were going to send me away, that you'd found out the child might not be yours. But that wasn't true, Nathan. The baby is yours. He wanted to make you doubt me, to destroy you. Please, for our child's sake, don't let him win. Emma's eyes blurred. Her hands shook as she looked up. She was telling the truth. Nathan, the baby was mine, he finished quietly. He sat back down, his face pale, empty, broken. I didn't find that letter until it was too late. I believed Lucas. I believed that my wife had betrayed me. When she crashed that car, I thought it was despair. I didn't know he had tampered with the brakes until later. By then, he closed his eyes. By then, my brother was already dead. Emma's voice trembled. You killed him? Nathan nodded slowly. In a moment of madness, he confessed. Said he did it all to save the family. I struck him. I didn't mean to kill him, but I did. And I buried him in the cellar because I couldn't face what I'd done. The silence that followed was suffocating. For the first time, Emma saw not the cold billionaire, but a shattered man, haunted, hollow, and damned by his own grief. So you've carried this all alone, she whispered. He looked at her, his eyes wet. Clara's ghost never left me, Miss Alvarez. Every night she sings that song, and I listen. I think she wants me to remember, not to forgive myself. Emma felt her own tears slip free. Maybe she wants you to tell the truth. To let her rest. Nathan stared at her for a long moment. Then he smiled sadly. Perhaps you're right. He rose, walked to his desk and opened a drawer. Inside were several old papers, property deeds, legal documents, photographs. He took one small envelope from the pile and handed it to her. This is for you, he said. Clara would have liked you. She had that same stubborn honesty. Emma opened it carefully. Inside was a letter of reference, a bank draft, and a small note in Nathan's own hand. Leave this house today. Do not look back, her heart pounded. Mr. Prescott, what are you planning? He smiled, faintly distant. To finish what I should have done long ago. Nathan, but he was already walking away toward the staircase leading up to the nursery. Go, Emma, please, before she starts singing again. She stood frozen as he disappeared upstairs. For a long moment the house was silent. Then she heard it, the faint creak of the nursery door opening, and the lullaby began. Soft, gentle, terrifying. Emma's breath caught. No! She ran up the stairs, her footsteps echoing off the marble. The nursery door was wide open now, light spilling out from within, golden, almost unnatural. Nathan Prescott stood by the cradle, his hand resting on its side, tears streaming freely down his face. Clara, he whispered, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. The mobile above the cradle spun faster, the glass stars glowing faintly. The lullaby grew louder, no longer distant but surrounding them, as if the entire house was singing. Nathan, Emma cried. Come away from there! He turned to her, smiling through his tears. She's here, Miss Alvarez. She's always been here. Then before Emma could move, the lights flickered violently. The windows slammed shut. The room filled with a gust of freezing air. The cradle began to rock on its own. Emma screamed his name, but in the chaos, Nathan simply closed his eyes and whispered, Forgive me. A deafening crack split the air as the chandelier above them fell, shattering against the floor. The room plunged into darkness. When Emma opened her eyes again, she was lying on the hallway floor. Smoke filled the corridor. The nursery door was engulfed in fire. She crawled forward, shouting for Nathan. But the flames were too fierce. The last thing she saw before she was dragged away by the arriving servants was Nathan Prescott standing inside the blaze, cradling the silver rattle to his chest as the ceiling collapsed around him. By the time the fire was out, the mansion was gone. The police found only ashes, charred furniture, and 2 items in the ruins of the nursery, a melted gold wedding ring and the silver rattle, miraculously untouched by flame. The newspapers called it a tragic accident, a wealthy man consumed by his own grief. But Emma knew better. She left Willow Creek that very night, carrying only Clara's letters in her bag. She never told the police about the cellar or the body or the baby that never was. Some truths, she decided, were too heavy for the living. Years later, when she passed by the ruins of the Prescott estate, she stopped by the iron gates and listened. The grass had grown tall again, the wind soft through the trees, and somewhere in that quiet, she swore she could still hear it, faint, distant, carried by the breeze. "Hush, my darling, don't you cry. Mama's here, she never died." Emma crossed herself, whispered a prayer for both the living and the dead, and walked away, never looking back. But as she disappeared into the morning mist, the wind changed direction, and for one fleeting heartbeat, a child's laughter echoed from the ruins, light and innocent, as if the house itself had finally found peace.